Kyurem was just banned from Gen 9 OU with an incredibly close vote. For a Pokemon to be banned in a suspect vote, a 60% majority needs to be reached. This vote ended with a 61.76% vote to ban, which is very close, especially compared to the last suspect vote on Gouging Fire, which had 91% vote to ban. Why is the community more divided on Kyurem than they were for past Pokemon ban votes that were way more one-sided? And was this the right decision? Let's take a look, folks. Subscribe to the channel for your own personal benefit. Thank you. Before Generation 8, Kyurem was actually one of the less impressive legendary Pokemon in the game. You might not think so looking at its stats, with its incredible HP stat of 125 and great offensive stats on both sides of the spectrum, with 130 in attack and special attack. Pretty serviceable bulk and speed considering how excellent the rest of the stats are. But Kyurem's problem has always been its typing. Ice typing is never good defensively. Kyurem has a damning weakness to rock, which is especially bad in singles where stealth rock is everywhere, and simply switching in causes you to lose a quarter of your health. And Kyurem just has below average speed and tends to be easily stopped by common defensive Pokemon, especially water types. But Kyurem would get a very significant new option in Generation 8 that pushed it over the edge into brokenness. Freeze Dry is an excellent attack, a 70 base power ice type special move that is able to hit water types super effectively instead of having them resist your attack. Kyurem happens to have access to Earth Power, and this combination of Freeze Dry and Earth Power is extremely difficult to switch in against. Kyurem also gained heavy duty boots in Generation 8, allowing it to patch up that rock weakness if it wants to. Many Kyurem sets just ran choice specs in this generation for immediate power, but the option to run heavy duty boots was significant. Kyurem was an overwhelming offensive presence in Generation 8 and ended up being banned from that format. And in Generation 9, it actually got even better with more options to abuse. Dragon Dance and Scale Shot were also some new tools that Kyurem got access to in Generation 8, but it didn't commonly use them back then. Scale Shot is a multi-hit dragon type attack that after use lowers your Pokemon's defense and raises their speed by one stage. Scale Shot became a significantly better move in Gen 9 with the release of the Loaded Dice item, which causes multi-hit moves to always hit at least 4 times. This allows Scale Shot to be used not only as a very high damage stab move, but a ramping move that can allow Kyurem to outrun everything while attacking the enemy and quickly snowball out of control. Quite a few Pokemon have been able to abuse this to a great extent, including Baxcalibur and Gouging Fire, and Kyurem can now do the same. The thing about Kyurem is that it has fantastic attack and special attack, making it very hard to actually know what it's going to use. It could be using a Dragon Dance Scale Shot set. It also has Icicle Spear, which synergizes with Loaded Dice, or it could be running choice specs with full special attacks, a set that proved problematic on its own back in Generation 8. You can even run a mix of many of these things with Dragon Dance Freeze Dry sets that aim to lure in and eliminate Dondozo, with Terastallization in the mix allowing Kyurem to patch up its awful Dragon Ice typing and either make itself more immediately threatening with bonus stab damage or ground type damage on Earth Power, or use a defensive Terra type like Steel or Fairy to provide itself free turns to set up Dragon Dance. Kyurem is a versatile threat that is not easy to respond to when you see it. And that sounds quite broken, but at the same time, this ban vote was very close. It wasn't like everybody agreed that Kyurem was broken enough to be banned in a sweeping majority. A lot of players believe that Kyurem is pretty manageable. Although Kyurem can be used in many different ways, that rock weakness is pretty damning still, especially because Loaded Dice and choice specs tend to be better options than heavy duty boots. If the Kyurem is running heavy duty boots, you're kind of glad because it has less offensive potency. Although it can be difficult to predict what the Kyurem is going to do when it's unrevealed, once you do see a couple of its moves, you can then probably respond to it pretty reasonably. It might get an unexpected advantage early on if it uses the right thing, but once you figure out what kind of Kyurem it is, you'll probably have some sort of response. As a Dragon Dance Terastallize abuser as well, Kyurem is not the most powerful one we've ever seen. Baxcalibur was a very similar Pokemon, and Baxcalibur is completely immune to being burned. Kyurem is not. Kyurem has no status immunity inherent to it. Compared to other Pokemon that use defensive Terastallization to find setup opportunities and sweep, I don't think that Kyurem was as overwhelming as some of the other ones that we've seen. Whether you enjoyed Kyurem's presence in the format or not, I think that there are fair arguments from both sides, and that reflects in how close the ban vote actually was. But at the end of the day, a majority of players did agree that they didn't want Kyurem in the format. This was a very close one, and a lot of people are upset by this. Kyurem is a fun Pokemon to use for many players that can in some cases reward skillful gameplay, good predictions. It's a pretty important team building option on hyper offense teams as well. But I think that the metagame will probably benefit from this ban overall. I've personally been playing a lot of Gen 9 OU in my downtime actually, trying to cook up some interesting teams, and I always felt a little bit restricted by Kyurem and how to respond to it. I mean, it has such perfect coverage and you have to cover multiple different sets on it. It's just a lot to ask of a team's defensive core, and I think part of the reason that a lot of people enjoy hyper offense in Gen 9 is because with hyper offense teams, you don't really have to worry about responding to a bunch of threats in the metagame. You just ignore all that and go completely aggressive. Instead of having defensive switch-ins and trying to respond to enemy Pokemon the old-fashioned way, you just keep going in with more and more aggression. Hyper offense teams can be interesting, but I don't mind them being nerfed a little bit by the removal of Kyurem from the metagame. If you're a hyper offense gamer, don't worry, I'm sure the archetype is still going to be fine. There are plenty of fantastic offensive threats you can use in this generation, and I think this will serve to make the metagame more balanced and enjoyable overall. And after this ban, I don't know what's next. A lot of people think Zamazenta is a problem. I actually disagree with that one. I like Zamazenta. I think Zamazenta keeps things in order, especially because it matches up so well into King Gambit. And the other Pokemon people have expressed some distaste towards is Darkrai, but I feel like Darkrai is at least only a special attacker. It doesn't have a million sets you need to cover. It can't put you to sleep anymore, and its coverage is limited enough that you can run responses to it. It's also not the fastest thing in the world in the Gen 9 metagame. There are faster Pokemon that can revenge KO it. So I don't know. I feel like Darkrai's okay in my opinion. Maybe I'll change my mind on that. What do you think about Gen 9 OU in its current state, folks? I can personally say that I've been enjoying it quite a lot recently. Even though I have been so critical of it before, I actually feel that you can be quite creative in Gen 9. The metagame has reached a reasonably healthy state, and it feels distinct from other modern metagames to me. I can't help but notice that I'm still getting a lot of comments about Terra, and the fact that Terra is somewhat of a common factor in these bans, as it tends to be a blanket buff to boost sweepers like this. But I have personally completely come around on Terra. I think Terra is what makes Gen 9 fun and unique. Even if some of the banned Pokemon are banned because Terra pushed them over the edge, I think that's a fine sacrifice to preserve this very unique mechanic that is fun to play with, is skillful, and makes the generation stand out. And in the case of Kyurem, I don't even think Terra is what single-handedly pushed it over the edge. Like I said, Kyurem was a problem in Gen 8, and in Gen 9 it is buffed with more options. An option I didn't even mention is Body Press, which can actually hit King Gambit. So yeah, at least in this instance, Terra was not the sole issue with Kyurem, and I'm personally happy with the decision to ban it. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my takes down below, and thank you for watching.